Welcome to this video on the Wara channel. My name is Sri Satguru Buddha Rawa Bhagwan. Today's video we're going to talk about the difference between the right-handed path and the left-handed path. You may have heard these terms before, right-handed path, left-handed path, and may know what you have read about them or been taught about them. These are two different approaches of spiritual practice. So today we're going to talk a little bit, very concisely, about the difference between the right-handed path and the left-handed path. The right-handed path gets a bad reputation. The left-handed path gets a bad reputation. The right-handed path gets a better reputation. The left-handed path gets a worse reputation. So both can get a bad reputation. And we can generally say that the right-handed path gets a better reputation. The Wara lineage accommodates both paths. So one can be of the right-handed path or of the left-handed path and can practice Wara, the lineage of the perfect husband. Someone, an individual, one person is inclined more towards one path, but can consciously change their own path. So they may be inclined more towards the left-handed path or the right-handed path, but can consciously change that path. And the decision of one's path is a decision a practitioner must make, and the decision never ends. You can also touch on both paths. The great yogi will take the left-handed path. This is the path that leads to becoming a god and knowing God. This is the path of the full avatar. The great Bhakta, devotee, will not seek to become the God, but will seek to know God and have God imprint himself on him and his life, or her life. The ultimate culmination of this is the partial avatar. Both are enlightened, but to a different degree. In the left-handed path, you discover the God that you are. In the right-handed path, you put your development under your Ishtadevata, your chosen favorite deity that you want to be under, seek shelter from, get direction from, and blessings from, but do not seek to necessarily become the God or a god. The Satguru is always to the left, and for his disciples accommodates both paths. The Guru is to the right and accommodates the right-handed path, and some Gurus are to the left and accommodate the left-handed path. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what these paths entail. So as I just said, the right-handed path involves putting yourself, the functions that you represent in the system, that you do with your everyday life, your functions within the computer program in which we exist. Okay? putting those functions under the directorship of another higher being, a higher developed being that controls higher functions, more developed, so that they can help you develop, right? And can guide you in your life, in your functions, so that you can do them in a more efficient and better way while growing as a spiritual being, growing as a being with your time and space, right? Growing as a being in your Sri Yantra, in your energy construct. So you put yourself under your Ishta Devata, okay? Whether that be God himself or a deity specifically, your favorite form, your favorite deity, okay? The one that you want to take guidance from, okay? The one that inspires you, if you want to see it that way, the one that feels the best, the most appropriate for you. And that can change in your life as you can move from one being under the directorship of one deity to another. You can move in your life. This is possible. And it's generally accepted amongst deities that you let practitioners move from one Ishtadevata to the next. You know, what comes and goes, it flows, right? And very rarely are there any issues, or does any deity take any offense or objection to the movement of a devotee towards another Ishtadevata. But it is known to happen sometimes, right? So usually there's an agreement made that that flow, that transition from one Ishtadevata in the system to the next is smooth and without contest. So the right-handed path, you put yourself under the development guidance of a deity, and you trust in that deity to help you, guide you, and promote your spiritual growth along your path, and to provide those guidance and that protecting hand in your spiritual practice that protects you and brings you closer to the ultimate truth of God. Okay? So that's the right-handed path. And then on that left-handed path, right, you are seeking to develop your personal power, right, as God, okay, in a different way. So what you're seeking to do here is, instead of putting yourself under a deity, okay, for guidance, you seek to promote your own development spiritually, right? So basically, you seek to do the means necessary, okay, and that's why there's a difference in approach in these paths, to push your growth spiritually at a faster rate, right? And the things that you might do to do that are potentially considered unclean or dirty or something like that by some people who have that kind of understanding of things. So you seek essentially to use your understanding, okay, of power and of the system to further your own development spiritually. So essentially what you are doing, is you are turning you yourself into your Ishtadevata, okay? And developing yourself as your Ishtadevata. So this is a much more difficult path and a much more rare path to have a true guru in the left-handed path. Because your basis for support is less there in many ways than on the right-handed path, where you have an Ishtadevata that guides you along that process and path, right? Your support system falls on yourself much more, right? So in that sense, much more pressure, if you want to say, on yourself to give yourself the guidance and the protection that you need, rather than putting yourself at the feet of a deity, right? So in one way, you put yourself at the feet of the deity and in the right-handed path and grow, and in the other path you become a deity that stands side by side with the other deities. So you wouldn't go to them and basically submit to them because you seek to be their equal, right? At that point. So you have a different approach. It's less the approach of bhakta or bhakti, right? And also more the approach of developing oneself and one's powers to reach the level of a deity, and to become the equal of the deity, and to essentially move forward as the equal of the deity. You cannot submit yourself to another deity. Instead of having a relationship of submitting, you have a relationship potentially of friendship, or potentially even a relationship of conflict. So the left-handed path is a difficult path because the supports you find on the right-handed path are less obvious on the left-handed path. So on the right-handed path, we see a lot of, different practices. So different concepts. So on the right-handed path, we see things like people don't smoke, people don't drink alcohol, people don't eat meat, right? People are very, try to act very sattvic, for example, right? People try to, are generally more gentle, less fierce, right? On the right-handed path, although they can be quite fierce on the right-handed path as well. But compared to a practitioner on the left-handed path. So, for example, we're going to bring those examples. Okay, the example of drinking. What does drinking do to someone? Okay, it alters a state of consciousness, right? And that can be used and understood by a practitioner on the left-handed path. The practitioner on the left-handed path seeks to not deny themselves the experiences of the world, but rather to have the experiences that are appropriate for their spiritual development, and does not necessarily have all the experiences, such as the ones that they do not want to have. So they have the experiences that they feel like having, that they want to have, right? That they decide to have. And on the right-handed path, the experiences that one has are the experiences one limits oneself to because one is told that these are things that one should do, or that these are things that one should not do. So the left-handed path has less support and is more difficult because you have less things to hold on to when things get difficult. So on the left-handed path, you may hear that the practitioner, the sadhaka, sometimes drinks alcohol, eats meat, smokes. Okay? So we know that, for example, drinking too much alcohol is bad for you, right? We know that if you eat too much, right, you'll be sick. And we know that if you eat meat, you have to take life to eat meat. And we know that taking life is not a good thing. But we know that in our history, it's been an essential thing. And then when we look at, for example, smoking, we know that smoking is bad for your health. If you smoke too much, it's bad for your health, right? It's not a good thing to do. However, The yogi who has experienced seeing the energy lokas knows that smoking activates a chimney within the spiritual being, activates an industry within the spiritual being, and brings the practice from the sattvic to the rajasic. So by smoking, which is something that is done by some practitioners of yoga, smoking, we know that we create an activity within the body as a yogi, an industry within the body with a chimney. And with that industry comes activity, rajas. And by bringing the light of one's practice into activity, into rajas, one redistributes the light evenly between the sattvic, the rajasic, and the tamasic. So in this way, smoking has an impact on one's spiritual practice. It is not necessarily the only way to practice, but it is a component of practice for a practitioner that may use that as a technique at some times of their practice on the left-handed path. This is one of the reasons that we see many practitioners of yoga in paramparas, sannyasis for example, who smoke. Some might not know the full reason why the smoke. Some do it to feel good. Some do it, and many will tell you it's a feel-good thing, right? But what does it do at the level of your spiritual practice? Why is it a part of the practice? When we do, for example, tapasya, do we seek to feel good? So is it to feel good, or is it to develop spiritually? So there are different practices on the different paths, on the right-handed and on the left-handed paths. And the Wara parampara accommodates both paths. More on the information on the paths. So in that sense, it is not necessary to limit oneself to one path. However, one should have an understanding of one's path to help guide future spiritual practice. How are you inclined as a being? How do you choose to be? And when do you choose to be that person? Thank you for listening to this video on the Zen Wara channel.